Hello, I am Chris Carville. Welcome to my podcast, Pedaling Squares Through a Mammal's Life, where we talk about endurance sports and endurance training through a master's athlete's lens. This time of the year, we're always worried about packing on pounds. We're enjoying time with family and friends. It's the natural course of things. We're going to put on a couple pounds, maybe more, in the off season, but it doesn't mean we're not thinking about nutrition. So, we're going to talk today with a professional nutritionist that works exclusively with athletes, young and old alike, Dawn Weatherwax, an eminently credentialed nutritionist, a wealth of information, and a good friend of mine. So please fire up your smart trainer, fire up your treadmill, and enjoy a listen to the conversation I had with Dawn Weatherwax on nutrition and endurance sports from a master's athlete's perspective. Enjoy. Three, two, one. Welcome to Pedaling Squares, where we talk about all things bikes and endurance athletes from a middle-aged perspective. Today, we're going to be chatting with Dawn Weatherwax. Dawn is a licensed dietitian with a specialty in sports nutrition and founder of Sports Nutrition To Go. She is also a board-certified specialist in sports dietetics. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did.
Which is the premier professional sports nutrition credentialing agency in the United States. She is also the author of 3 books: The Complete Idiot's Guide to Sports Nutrition Guide for Young Athletes, and the Official Snack Guide for Beleaguered Sports Parents, of which I am one, times 4. She's a frequent presenter on nutrition at a local and a national level, and she is also my nutritionist. So welcome, thank you, and how are you, Dawn?
Oh, thank you for it's such a pleasure, Chris. I can't wait to see if we can hash some things out for your listeners.
Well, I have plenty to talk about, and before we do that, I want to get a little bit of history on Dawn. You have a veritable alphabet after your name. You're an RD, a CSSD, an LD, an ATC, and a CSCS. So my question to you is, did you always plan to work with athletes, or is that something that you evolved into, fell into? How did you get where you are?
How did it happen? So I was one of those people that loved athletics, but was not very good at athletics. And in high school, a long story short, had gotten involved in athletic training in high school, and I worked with athletes that way. Thought I was going to do athletic training and teaching to follow my mentor at that time in high school. But I realized my very first year in college, sitting in the back of this PE for principals, if you could believe I remember that. I still see it in my brain, sitting in the back row, not the front row, the back row, and going, I'm trying to picture myself teaching PE, and I go, oh my gosh, no, this isn't it. This is not going to work. And I thought I had my life planned out. And within 2 weeks of starting college, I said, okay, I'm doing athletic training. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to keep doing that, but I had help with my athletic trainer there, the head athletic trainer. She's like, what about sports nutrition? And the minute she said that, it just a light bulb went off, because I didn't even know that sports nutrition existed. I thought to be a dietitian, it only meant hospital based, and there was no way I would work in a hospital. It did not even turn on any lights. So when she said that, we rewrote Nancy Clark. She's still very well known in my profession. And she wrote us back, and off I went and did athletic training. I decided that athletic training was going to give me an edge in sports nutrition, because there there's no degree in sports nutrition at that time. And still you have to piecemeal it together. And I just it clicked. I go, oh my gosh, if I do athletic training, and that means not a personal trainer for those people out there. A lot of people get it confused. It's when you work with the athletes, you're the person running out on the field, or in Chris's sake, if he's fallen over on his bike out there, the person that might be helping out if they're an athletic trainer, because a lot of times they help cover those events, or tape an ankle or assess an injury. That's when an athletic trainer, I go, wow, that is going to give me a competitive edge, because I'll have exercise physiology. I'll understand injuries and recovery and what it takes to be an athlete. And I don't know how I came to that conclusion. So by the end of my freshman year, it just was a light bulb that said, that's what I'm going to do. And you go down the dietetic route, because I didn't want to get stopped by any laws. And you're a medical professional. So most people don't realize, to be a sports dietitian, it takes like 7 to 9 years of schooling.
Wow.
To get to this point. So it's not, but a lot of people, if they say they're a nutritionist, they could be in high school. They could be 6 years old. It doesn't matter, but because they look great and they perform well, they must have the credentials or the advice.
High performance, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah. If you're ripped and you have a great body fat and you kick out some wattage, why not?
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about being ripped, because everybody on YouTube seems to have a ripped six pack, and whatever they're recommending will evolve into a ripped six pack. I could be wrong about that, but it does seem to go.
It would be nice. Let's see what kind of doctoring they might be doing. But
for sure, Photoshop and the like.
Yeah.
But my YouTube feed is full of hacks. Okay, and when I say hack, I don't mean hack like we're taking shortcuts. But if you'll recall, and we'll talk about hacks if we talk as a lead up to how you and I got working together. Yep. But if you remember all those 7 years ago, I came to you with splitting headaches, low energy level, and I wasn't able to put 2 and 2 together. I was on a paleo diet, trying to lose weight, because that's what cyclists want to do. You lose weight, you go up the side of the hill faster. And I was concerned. I didn't feel very good on a lot of levels. And the first thing you did was, when we sat down, was have me list out my daily caloric intake and where it was coming from. And then you had me take a metabolic test with, I think it's called a med gem. Is that right?
Yeah.
To calculate my resting metabolic rate. And we discovered 2 things very quickly. I wasn't getting enough calories, and I certainly wasn't getting enough carbs. And my head was particularly upset about that. So, with that as kind of a backdrop, is in this channel really is about endurance athletes. Is there a place in an endurance athlete's diet for keto, paleo, intermittent fasting, those types of things? They may be good hacks for a particular end, getting to a ripped six pack. But if you're trying to get from the start line to the finish line, is there a place in an athlete's diet for those kind of hacks? Is it the time of the year? Is it the lead into a particular event, or is it just a bad idea to go down those roads?
So nutrition is so complex, because every individual is different and everybody's genes are different. And we touched upon this in the conversation, that even in your own pack or your own family, right? So I have an 8-year-old who loves animals. So I know a lot more words of if you're in a pod or a pride or a pack, but your family, as humans, your family, that even with your own children or your own siblings, that you're different, and and what you need might be different than what your mom or dad needs or your siblings need. And it changes as you get older. So it's so difficult to answer all those questions. Because I can tell you, I had one person who was a cyclist who followed paleo for 8 months rigidly, and he felt great. But he did something very wise. He got blood work done. And he got his blood work done, and hit on paleo, his cholesterol was off the chart too high.
Surprise,
but he felt
surprise.
great, right?
Yeah.
And so here's the thing that people don't realize. If you get gene testing done, there is a gene that does tell you that it might not be best for you to go over 10% saturated fat. And some people with coconut oil don't do that well with that. Even though they say it's a medium chain triglyceride, it works well. It doesn't always work well for everybody. And for him, that was his main, like he was getting a lot of, and his cholesterol was way too high. Now you're going to find this very fascinating. So guess what he did? He decided to go vegan. I'm not joking.
Because that's the opposite of paleo.
That's because that helps you get your cholesterol down.
Right.
And I don't even know. I couldn't do that. But again, he was like, okay, I will do vegan. And he did vegan for 8 months. I don't know what's magical about 8 months, and he followed it. And he goes back in and he does blood work, and his cholesterol was the best it ever was. But his triglycerides were way too high.
Here we go.
So his carbs were too high. If he didn't do blood work, he would never know what was working and what was not working. So most people don't do the testing. They go by, if they go into a quest of, I'm going to do keto or paleo or vegan or whatever, a lot of times people are eating pretty crappy. They already feel crappy. They've been eating crappy, and then they're ready to try something. And usually you're going to feel better if all of a sudden you start eating cleaner and you're doing better things. But long-term wise, it usually, there's a difference between doing something for 1 to 3 months to something that's 6 to 8 months or a year or longer. And that's where I challenge people. If you're going down any quest, you need to know the science behind it and follow that. Keto, here's the deal with keto. If you're a cyclist and you're not wanting to, if you're going to cycle 20, 25 miles per hour, probably keto might work for you. But I don't know of many of my cyclists that like to go 20, 25 miles per hour for a race. And eventually, if they really try to do that, they're going to struggle. Because to be fat adaptive, what I've seen with most people who do the science is if they do it for a longer period of time, they will lose muscle mass. And when I mean longer period of time, 8 months to a year. And then I find that most cyclists are long endurance. If they really follow a true keto, they usually get really tired, and they because the carbs in their muscle are,
they're not replenishing their carb needs.
And you cannot, whatever anybody tells you, you cannot convert fat fast enough to be energy in that situation. And, red blood cells, brain. Okay. So red blood cells, nerve cells, nerve, brain, and red blood cells. You cannot convert fat into a fake carb for that. That's why type 1 diabetics, what do they have problems with? Kidney, nerves, because they could die, and that's because carbs are needed in certain amounts at certain times. So I kind of know too much, and sometimes my brain just goes wacko. But
that's something I forgot to mention was on the front end. Not only did we do the metabolic resting rate and the diet analysis, and we'll talk about body fat here in just a second, but you also did my blood work.
Yeah.
And that's for that reason, right? I mean, that's to know, kind of get a baseline on where the triglycerides are, what my health is as a blood test will provide. And that's, that's not something you can get online, is it? That's you got to order it through your doctor and provide somebody with some know-how to like yours to take a look at the results and interpret them.
And that's where people, if they really want to listen to, if somebody reads something and it says it does this, that, and you can measure it, then you should measure it. You should take the time to do that. And for some reason, if you don't have the insurance, or, here's the thing, there's a lot of online things. If you want to pay out of pocket, request a test, those things that you can test it. And you might find it even cheaper, and you don't have to have a doctor's referral. There's athletes' blood tests. So you can find out stuff, but you really need to know that if you can't just go by how you feel, because it doesn't always work.
And I want to kind of circle back to that resting metabolic rate. Before we talk about how you tested it, the question that I think about in my approaching the tender age of 50 is, does an athlete's metabolic rate go down as they age?
Okay, so it can, because testosterone can go down as you age, but if you track your testosterone, that's going to help know. And that, I always think that's good to add on to your yearly panel. But I'm going to show you my things, right? So after age 30, okay, so here's my pound of fat.
It's beautiful.
Nice. This is what that looks like. Nice and jiggly. It really looks like this, nice and lumpy. It's just not as yellow, but this was truly what a pound of fat. This is how a pound of fat is. And obviously we need some fat. And then this is a pound of muscle. Okay. So after age 30, it's been told to us that after age 30, we have the propensity to lose up to 2 pounds of muscle a year if you don't do something to maintain it. So what happens in the cardio world is you're told, well, you don't need that muscle, or you don't need upper body strength if you're cycling, or, oh, well, I'm doing running, so that should be enough. And it's not. Do you have to go all of a sudden go throw weights around and start being a bodybuilder? No, but you have to put a little bit of resistance to these muscle groups to maintain them. And that it can be your own body weight to start off with. And again, if it's not enough, you will know that because you should be testing your body composition yearly or bi-yearly, or however you want to do it, to see if this is enough to maintain what you have, or do you need more. So body weight could be push-ups, pull-ups, squats, even wall squats, things like that, walking lunges, step-ups, to work all, the old school way of doing it. Now,
I did not realize the number was 2 pounds.
Yeah, up to 2 pounds of lean weight a year.
Wow.
Now, you forward 30 to 40, and what do most people say? I hit my 40s, and some people say 45 or 50. And I just go, well, where was your lean weight? Where is it now? So to answer your question on the metabolism, your muscle is your metabolism, okay? And what happens is, when you lose, let's just do math, that's easy, and you lose a pound a year for 10 years, and now you're 40, well, you're usually not weighing 10 pounds less, right? You're not. So what's happened is, if you replace 1 pound of muscle with 1 pound of fat, now that's completely different. Yeah. Now, this fat thing does not take a lot of energy. This thing stores carbs. This thing, is your muscle. This is your thing that gives you more wattage. And people get confused with carbs. You want there to be carbs in the muscle. So when they talk about fat adaptive, all I can tell you with, again, another device that I test, Muscle Sound, to test the carbs, if it's supposed to take you 2 years to become fat adaptive, I don't know usually I've seen a lot of muscle loss, and I don't know how your performance is going to be great if you followed a true keto. Because I don't think most people, when they talk about eating lower carbs, are doing a true keto.
Ketosis seems like a high wire act. That you have to have the kind of a monastic self-discipline to stay in that place.
Well, and usually you feel tired and fatigued, and if you're doing it the true way. So you want to put carbs back in this precious muscle, and this is where you store carbs. So imagine you lose 10 pounds of this and you replace it with 10 pounds of that. Well, your metabolism is going to be less, right?
Yeah, because you got less engine burning your car, or you're burning up your calories.
And so the calculations as you get older automatically assume you're going to have a lower metabolism. And I would say in my office, my athletes, they want to know this information, and they're more active, and you don't see that is always the case. You see a lot of times when they know this information and they're maintaining their lean or even gaining lean weight, that they burn just as much as they did 10 years ago. And so then when you put in your heart rate monitor or your Apple Watch, you have to understand that's a calculation. Anytime you put height, age, weight, gender, that's a energy calculate. That's a calculation. Yeah. And so they're already estimating what you should be burning because of the data you just applied to it.
Well, let's talk about that formula. Am I wrong? Is it an extra 500 calories a day? Well, how's that correlate to weight gain?
So supposedly, if you eat an extra 500 calories in excess of what you are burning, then that extra 500 calories is equivalent to gaining 1 pound of fat.
That's what I thought. Now what I'm driving towards here is the Apple Watch or the online calculation that could be off over 500 calories.
Might.
Right.
It could be because everybody now, if they had a piece where you can just put, okay, so there's a site online called, and I'm not sure if these other apps do this, so don't, for other apps out there, please forgive me, but Chronometer, CRONO meter, they actually, if you open on their line, and this is just a recording app, log what you're eating, they give you a place to put your biometric number. They give you a place to put in if you've had your metabolism measured.
Right.
Instead of them using an equation, because let's face it, most people are not going to test because this is our med gym, right? And we put this mouthpiece on it and you just breathe into it with your nose plug.
Yeah, that only took me 5 minutes, didn't it?
Yeah. And 5 to 10 minutes. And here's what people don't realize is someone smart. It's technically called indirect calorimetry, is the scientific name for all of it. But it tells you what you're resting, what your metabolism is doing at rest.
So you get that done in your office. That's the gold standard. You don't have any variability in the testing because it is your resting rate, right? Regardless of how old you are. And you could be, I don't know, in your mid 40s and have the metabolism of somebody in their 20s. And then your calculations would be way off if you relied on the online calculators.
Right. And sometimes you have to use some common sense when you're hungry and you're going, well, this is what it told me I need to do and to get leaner. And the next thing you find yourself is starving. And anytime you're starving, it means your calculations are off. Because
I can relate to that.
Yeah. Remember how you were under eating? And I'm just like, and this is the other thing that people have to understand, because people get confused. They're like, well, I've been doing this for this long, and you're now telling me I've been doing this for 2 years, eating this way, that I'm not eating enough. Well, my weight's been the same. But I don't know if your body composition has been the same, because in that scenario, people don't realize that the best way I can explain it is your body internally has no eyeballs or ears to this world. So if you could pretend that you can't see me and then pretend you can't hear me, which you have to hear me to hear this explanation, but food by definition is a calorie. Calorie by definition is heat, and heat by definition is energy. So food, calorie, heat, energy. But let's stop at the heat part, right? So what are you doing when you're working out? That's heat. Your heart pumping is heat. Your lungs needing, all this stuff going on. So if it's like, wow, the output is here, but the input heat is here, and this gap is too big, the body goes, okay, did their crops die? Right.
Is there a pandemic going on out there?
Yeah. Is there the crudes and I didn't club my mammoth today to eat,
right?
Or a saber-toothed tiger, to eat, or it doesn't know. You're not trekking through the forest or the desert trying to find food. That's what your signals are giving it. And so then if you give it that signals, it's going to start to go, I need to protect you. I will survive this. So if you don't do it for me, I'm going to help you. And I'm actually going to help you bring your metabolism down. I'm going to make you not hungry, because that would be really crude to be hungry all the time when you're actually starving. And then I'm going to actually hold on to some of this fat, and I'm going to let you lose some muscle, because
the just in case scenario,
right?
Yeah.
It's going to keep you alive a lot longer. And so the body has no idea that you're trying to go on a century ride or marathon or half Ironman or whatever events that you're trying to do. It does not know that. It does not care. It just says, this is what you're saying to me, and I will survive this. And then that's how your body adapts. And you got to get out of that if you're in that. And that's really scary for people, right? Because the first thing you think of is, I'm going to gain weight, Dawn. I'm going to gain fat, and I'm going to be slower. And here's the thing. You don't have to take a bulldozer and just put all the calories back in. You take a shovel. And you just a little bit at a time, and you're going to get used to it, and you're going to start to feel better, or the pieces are going to come to better, and you're going to see, you should see better results if that's the situation.
Yeah, that's like rethinking how I do it on a daily basis, right? Like, what's my breakfast going to look like? And it doesn't look like what it used to. I'm uncomfortable with that because I'm going to have a performance drop off, and then I'm going to have to fix it all this year. And then hopefully next year it'll go back to normal. And you're asking a lot. You're asking a lot of a client to walk away from age-old wisdom that they've acquired that's totally anecdotal, not supported by a blood test, a metabolic test, or a body fat test. It's just, it worked. It ain't broke, I don't think. Why fix it? Right.
Exactly.
So let's talk about athletes that are, like, take your Ironman example, that are out there doing, a 12, 14, 16 hour event. All right. And that's an entirely different manner of taking in calories, not to mention the digestive issues and everything else that goes with it. But I don't know how recent this is that you've rolled out I think it's called metabolic efficiency testing. So tell me a little bit about that and how it benefits what I'll call the right side of the bell curve, or however you want to describe it, as far as endurance athletes that are out there.
Bob Seebehor, who is an awesome sports dietitian / exercise physiologist in Colorado, has come up with this testing, and he has a vast network of clients that are cyclists and triathletes, and even at the Olympic and world level. So his experience is vast. And
in case anybody wants to Google him, how do you spell his
Bob
name?
Seebehor. Oh my gosh, Bob, you're going to kill me. It's like Bob. That's easy. Seebehor, I want to say it's SEE. If you get that, and then BOHAR, I think.
All right, he's in Colorado. That'll help with the Google search.
Colorado, you will find him. But Bob is wonderful, and he came up with this technique, and you have to have a metabolic cart to do it. And it's not a VO2, but it will actually share with you where you're at and how we can change the nutrition. So VO2 is mainly exercise based, and this is 75% how to change your nutrition to burn more fat is the best way to explain it. And who doesn't want to know where they're at and then what they need to change nutritionally? And or even sometimes it can say, hey, you should run some miles at this pace, or you should ride your bike, some of it at that pace, to get you into more fat burning.
So it'll correlate your heart rate to fat burning levels, and then you can just dial it in within a few beats per minute.
He has an excellent book if you want to read all about it. He does have a great book, and he's well versed, and he would explain his technique way better than me.
Is that available to your athletes, or do they have to travel to get that type of testing?
So here's the thing. Right now, you can do the testing at Louisville or at OSU, at Ohio State, because currently there's no metabolic cart in this area.
Gotcha.
But I'm hoping to have one in a year, because I have my hands on one. I just have to get it here. But then Bob, I can read it for you. You just have to get the testing done. Now, if you go to Louisville or you ask them at Ohio State, or some other places across the United States, is it's really good to probably contact Bob or myself. But Bob has a whole list on his website, and I'll give you that information so you can post it.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that all at my disposal right now in my brain. And that's more
You mean
why.
we didn't go over each and every question before we started? So you have all
that
this at
one
your
I don't
fingertips?
have memorized, but he's wonderful. And it's even worth him reviewing the data with you, because you don't have to have, you don't have to be in person to review the data. But
For sure.
those sites that you do it have to understand how to do the test. And some sites, they get randomly asked, so they have to be reminded how you want the test done.
Okay. So kind of walking the viewer through at least what you did with me and what you do with most of the athletes. You have the caloric analysis, you have the metabolic resting rate calculated, and then there's the analysis of your diet, and then there's the moment of truth. How fat are you? Right?
The bod pod.
So talk to me.
Are we?
Right. We're not going to use my numbers as an example. But my question for you is the bod pod itself. Now, when I was a younger athlete, I did the hydrostatic testing. I've had the calipers done, and I'm thinking, is it electronic impedance or electromagnetic impedance?
There's bioimpedance, yes.
So let's just talk about, like, not necessarily which one's the gold standard, or if you want to talk about it in those terms, but what can an athlete rely on as far as the type of testing that you provide, and then how does that testing in the bod pod compare to like one of those Ironman scales or the calipers that you might see at the local gym?
Right. Okay. When you are talking about calipers, give me 1 second. I should have had them with me. I have calipers.
This is further evidence that we didn't rehearse.
Further evidence that I was not prepared as I'm talking. As this is me doing things on the fly and think, maybe I could show you my calipers so you know what I'm talking about. So calipers are these things. Okay. So there's so many sites that you can do. And what you do is, you grab the fat, you grab it and you pinch it, and it tells us so many millimeters. And then that goes into an equation, and that can tell you body composition. Now, first of all, these are scientific calipers. If you buy plastic ones, they're not going to work as well. They're going to, so what happens is, if you know somebody who does calipers, part of their training or part of their package of when you're working with them, it really is dependent on the person and how well they do it, how often, they should do 3 sites. They should do each site 3 times within a millimeter, and they should keep going until they do. On top of the fact, they need to do really 9 to 12 sites if they're going to get a more accurate picture. Here's the thing. A lot of us store fat under the muscle. So if you're somebody who tends to store your fat under your abdominal wall or your tummy, and it's not jiggly fat, and I know I always tell people it's better to have jiggly fat than the fat that doesn't jiggle.
Well, that makes me feel
the guy
only a little
that
bit better.
Pregnant, I hate to pick up on a guy, but that guy that looks pregnant when you're going to the grocery store, that is fat that's underneath the muscle, right? Mm-hmm. So, because that's why it's so solid. And that's really scary, because now he or she, because females are like that too, if they're more apple shaped, is now they're pushing all this fat inside against all their organs. That's why being more apple shaped is dangerous than pear, because you don't have organs in your glutes and your hamstrings and your quads. You don't have your heart and your lungs and everything that's so important. You have it between neck and waist, where the majority of everything that's important to our bodies are. And that's why I always joke, but that's why jiggly fat is better. And you can pinch the jiggly fat. But the problem is you can't pinch through the muscle to get to the fat that's underneath. And that's what makes calipers more inaccurate. And also, a lot of I think fact, they just didn't do a lot for females, because most females can hold body fat in a lot of many other places that you just don't pinch. And that's why those are hard to use, but they can be used.
Now, how does
And
the
then
how does the bod pod? So the issue with the calipers, if I'm understanding correctly, is that there's variability in between people about where they store their fat. And then there is variability with regard to the ability of the caliper applier to effectively do it. All that, none of that's an issue if you either do hydrostatic testing or bod pod, because it is what it is. So talk a little bit about how a bod pod works.
Yeah. So a bod pod, underwater weighing had been forever the main means to measure body composition. What that is you get there's a tank of water, and they know how much volume of water is in that tank. And then you proceed to sit down in it. They usually have a chair that's not attached to the bottom.
I had to hold my breath.
Yeah. And then you have to, and then you sit with your head above the water, right? And then you have to slowly bend down and huff out all your air. And that seat is connected to a scale. And then once you immerse your whole body underwater, it will tell you how much water you displaced. And somebody very smart figured out that they could tell the difference between how much was it of fat and how much was lean. Okay. Now, lean weight is not just muscle, though. So it's measuring fat and then everything else: eyeballs, the hair on your head, your skin, your bone mass. And that's how. But once you get past your puberty, so guys are out of puberty between age 22 and 25. Females are usually done with puberty around age 18. But all of us can build bone up until age 25 or 30. So that's the last thing that we can keep building after all our other body parts are finished growing or whatever needs to happen. So if you figure that you're not going to grow anymore, and you're not going to be a cyclops and grow an extra eyeball, and then most people aren't going to grow 5 pounds of hair by the time they get it done the next time, that the only thing that changes lean weight-wise that much is water and muscle. Because remember, we can gain or lose muscle.
Right.
And that's why for the bod pod, it does air displacement. So it took the lady from California, took the science from underwater weighing, so water displacement, and then applied it to air disbursement or displacement. And that's how it works. And
that's the bod pod. The bod pod's air.
Bod pod.
The hydrostatic is water. Same principle, just a different calculation with regard to what's being displaced.
And a lot of people feel more comfortable with the bod pod because you don't have to immerse yourself in water. You just sit in this chamber. You can be up to 500 pounds and 7'2". Most people, they're not going to feel claustrophobic in that. Plenty of air. It's invasive. And you just sit in there.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to do. And it's much easier to have an establishment because you can move the bod pod to different locations. Where when you have underwater weighing, it's very difficult on a business plan to put that in. And I believe Ohio State still has one. I believe the people who still have underwater weighing are mainly sports exercise physiology platforms.
Yeah.
There might be some outliers, but I don't think there's that many.
Yeah.
Right. And then the third one that's really accurate is Dexa. So Dexa is known for bone density, but it's very accurate as well for body composition. And that one is even going to break it down even further. It's going to tell you your right arm versus your left arm, your right leg versus your left leg. It will also do a measurement of your tummy and tell you how much, fat, or I call it visceral fat, but how much fat that you have there. And it will even tell you if you're at risk or not. And those are really nice to have done if you can do it. The problem with that is they're very expensive. Most of them are in hospital settings, so that for you to get that done, you're going to have to pay a premium price. But if you have one in your area that's in a doctor's office, and again, at an exercise physiology facility, it's well worth it. Even in my hometown of Kearney, Nebraska, they got a grant at their university there, and they open it up to the public, and they can get Dexas done for $25 per person.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And so there's places like that make it available. And I tell people, you can't avoid not doing it if you have access like that.
No, you can't. That's like going through the drive-through and buying your kids a couple Big Macs for the price of one drive-through.
Or Starbucks, a couple
right,
of stuff
or even
at
worse.
Starbucks, right?
Right. With all those macchiato lattes at tipping the scales at 1,400 calories.
You got it. And I do want to share one other one because it has come up and it's a much more abundant now. It's called InBody. And I know there's another company out there too, but InBody, it's a very high-end bioimpedance device. And those are about 10 grand. And LA Fitness and a lot of those have brought those in. And I want to say that it can be as accurate as bod pods and underwater weighing, but I've also seen it off some.
Right.
And but
that could be a calibration
so it could be
issue on
2
there.
to 6%, maybe it's that variance on that.
Now, does anybody ever get their body fat results from you and think, wow, that's a little low?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Most of the time I get the opposite and they're not very happy with me because they don't realize I have that much body fat. And then the other thing that you probably remember learning is the first thing, everybody wants to look at the percent fat, but I'm looking at the lean because that's what's going to make you a better athlete. That's what's going to get your wattage. And where are you? And I've done over 14,000 bod pods and nobody's given me a chart, but I've kind of created my own chart on where I feel lean weight should minimally be. And when I'm talking lean weight, we know that I'm not going to change your height. So at this point, the total lean weight, I'm talking about, well, how much muscle would be better for you? Because most cyclists and endurance athletes don't have enough muscle and they're trying to be better. And you're going, well, wait a second, based on what I see here is you need 8 pounds less of fat and you need 8 more pounds of muscle. And that is going to be your ticket to being better and being faster. And then also when you're 70, most people start falling and your goal is, well, I'm not going to be one of those people because I'm not going to lose that lean weight. Or now I know that I'm going to gain this lean weight back that I've lost. And I'm going to go forward with my life and do the things that I want if we have that opportunity.
Yeah. And that's something we all hope is to enjoy a rich retirement or at least a little advanced life. But that's something we can't control. But it's certainly the goal is to be healthy when you get there.
Try if you have it, right?
So before we leave this body fat discussion, is my understanding correct or incorrect that we have a certain number of fat cells and when we burn the fat, we're actually just making them smaller. We're not actually eliminating fat cells. Is that like an urban myth I've picked up along the way? Or are we actually burning it off our bodies?
I wish we were burning it off our bodies. It would be great. So it is not an urban myth because that's why it is so, I would say so too much. Anyways, I'm trying to work on that, you guys. The thing is when you put on new weight and you hit a new 10 pounds, that you will have those fat cells forever. That is why also it's imperative to, when you're younger, to try not to be obese or too much body fat when you're young. And that is, now I'm getting my own self flustered here, but here's the thing. When you put on the fat cells don't go away and they just deflate. And the only way you can get rid of them is surgically and or the lasers do work. So if you're wondering about cold sculpting, and there's even more advanced products than cold sculpting now, they really do kill the fat cells, but they're only killing it on the surface layer. They're not going to get underneath the muscle and they can only go so deep and it will cost you a lot of money.
Right. And
But
isn't it visceral fat that sits on the outside of the body versus
actually on the inside of the body.
inside's this, help me out with the language.
Now, visceral fat is the fat that's inside.
And that's the sculpting won't touch that. Yeah.
And that's why when people have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes issues, they usually have some good amount of, they either because they have a lot of body fat from neck to waist, and or they're storing more underneath the muscle layer.
All right. I promised that was my last fat question, but you just made me think of another one. Do some people just genetically acquire fat in different parts of their body and it's just how they are?
Yep. And you got to thank your family tree for that one.
Okay. And that kind of leads me into this kind of fat discussion and the genetics of where it ends up on your body. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday, not that this was rehearsed for our audience, but I asked you if you had read the book, Good Calories, Bad Calories by a guy named Gary Taubes. And Gary is an interesting writer. I think he used to write for Science Magazine. So he has a gift for taking very complicated scientific stuff and reducing it down to a readable level for the average Joe or on the street. But and if you watch some of these dieting, and they typically are vegan, and I'm not going to comment on that one way or the other, but these kind of pro-vegan documentaries, he's often an interviewee on these. And in his thesis, and he doesn't have a PhD after his name, he's just a science writer that's got a gift for writing about science, and I'm paraphrasing, is that the basic thesis is that not all people's metabolism is the same. And in my words, everyone kind of has this genetic set point from skinny to chubby. And if you're not vigilant about your diet or focused on your diet, you're going to drift one way or the other. You're going to drift back to your set point of being skinny, or you're going to drift to your set point being chubby. And most of the science and study is on the chubby folks. And I don't mean to disparage anybody by using the word chubby. It's just the vernacular I've chosen. But this idea that husky is probably a better word, that you have a kind of a husky set point. And that's important when you're a cyclist, because you're thinking things through, like, what kind of cyclist am I going to be? Am I going to be a time trialist? Am I going to be a guy that succeeds, or a gal that succeeds in the mountains or on the hills? And there's some body composition issues that you just kind of have to think through. When I put the thesis forward that way, does that ring true in your experience, or is he off the mark?
Yeah. Well, this being our final question for this podcast, I would say that he has some validity, because what you eat, so macros are three things, right? Macros mean large, carbs, fats, and proteins are your macros, and micros is just what you think: vitamin A, vitamin C, iron, zinc, everything else goes into micros. But macros are your fundamental base of most nutrition. And it truly does matter how clean you eat, when you eat the protein, watching added sugar, watching how much saturated fat you consume, how you do post-recovery nutrition. Now, how much carbs, fats, and proteins, that's where you single it out for each individual, what's better. But it also depends, how much are you training? Somebody who's doing an Ironman, that's way different than somebody who's doing a sprint event, sure. Right? If you're doing a 3K, a 5K walk versus, a half marathon, that's different. If your pace is a 6-minute mile pace versus somebody who runs 11-minute mile pace, that's something different. Everybody is different. And it does truly make a difference how you group those things together and how clean it is. And I will give you the people out there, probably some really quick tips. If you tracked your fiber, most people should be at 25 to 40 grams of fiber a day. If you keep your saturated fat under 10%, that would be a good goal. If you keep your added sugar, not natural's from lactose, from milk and berries and fruits, because most people, I wish people would be honest with themselves. Most people don't binge on fruit. Most people don't choose to have a bad weekend and go to the grocery store and buy and make a fruit salad. I don't know about you, but that's not
that's not my binging.
Right? I just, people put this fruit in this category. It's so bad. I'm like, holy cow. That's not where usually people have issues with. And maybe once in a blue moon, I tell somebody they can't eat as much fruit, but there's some medical reasons for that. That if they kept their added sugar to 25 grams of added sugar or less a day when it's appropriate, because again, if you're cycling or you have something that's long, you can't always follow those guidelines based on what your nutrition needs to be to fuel for those events. But in daily, you're going to be pretty successful. And if you get enough protein at the right times. But those are just some key things that people just took away and logged. It would force them to make better changes. And it does make a difference on body composition, because I see it all the time. And then that in turn would make it better for your health and your performance.
All right. I'm going to let it end right there.
I know we can talk all day.
Well, when I bring you back, I'm going to hold you to it. I want to talk adrenal fatigue, stress, and cortisol.
Oh, I know. That's a whole nother hour. We can do that.
Great. Thanks for coming aboard. Remind everybody this YouTube channel gets more logarithm love when you like and subscribe. So please like and subscribe, and look up Dawn. Where can we find you on the interwebs?
Oh goodness, Dawn Weatherwax. So weather, like the weather outside, and you wax your car. So Dawn Weatherwax, and Sports Nutrition to Go. If you SN2G,
yeah, that's
those things, numerical. You should find it.
All yes. Right. Got it. Thank you for your time. Get back to it. Keep doing the good work.
Thank you, Chris. You too.
Take care.
Pleasure.